Egyptian president receives his Kyrgyz counterpart in Cairo. Israeli Prime Minister declares that Hamas has no option but to surrender. And Vladimir Putin instructs top officials to draft proposals on potential nuclear weapons testing. p.m. here in Cairo. Time for the news with Mihal Al-Hamalawi. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has received Kyrgyz President Sadir Jarapov in Cairo, marking the first ever Kyrgyz presidential visit to Egypt. The two leaders held bilateral talks following an official reception and signed two memoranda of understanding. President al-Sisi hailed the visit as a milestone for expanding cooperation, welcoming Kyrgyzstan's decision to open an embassy in Cairo as a strategic step to deepen economic, trade and investment ties. Discussions also addressed joint manufacturing prospects, religious dialogue to counter terrorism and regional issues, including Egypt's ongoing efforts to sustain the Gaza ceasefire and host an international conference on early recovery and reconstruction later this month. Egyptian Defense Minister and Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief General Abdelmegid Saqr has affirmed that Egypt has chosen peace as its strategic path, believing that it will be the foundation for stability and development. Speaking during a military inspection of a central military zone formation, he emphasized that peace must be safeguarded by strength, noting Egypt's continuous modernization of training and weapon systems across all branches. Saqr conveyed President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's appreciation to the troops for their readiness and morale. The event showcased advanced weaponry, aerial displays, and the participation of highlighting Egypt's defense capabilities and commitment to protecting national security. Cairo will host the Egypt Gulf Cooperation Council Trade and Investment Forum on the 19th and 20th of November 2025 under the title Launching a Partnership Road Towards Strengthening Egypt-Gulf Economic Cooperation. Organized by Egypt's Ministry of Trade and Industry and the GCC Secretariat in cooperation with several Egyptian institutions, the forum, held under the patronage of Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and GCC Secretary General Jassim Al-Budewi, aims to deepen economic ties, expand trade, and promote investment opportunities in Egypt. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry added that the event will feature ministers, investors, and business leaders, B2B and B2G meetings, an investment exhibition, and field visits highlighting major projects in industry, energy, infrastructure, tourism, and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, we have breaking news. This is just in. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has reaffirmed the deep and growing ties between Egypt and South Africa, particularly in economic and trade cooperation and coordination within the AU, UN, and BRICS. This came during his call with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, where Ramaphosa praised the outcomes of the Sharm el-Sheikh Peace Summit and Egypt's efforts to end the Gaza conflict. President al-Sisi emphasized full implementation of the ceasefire and announced a reconstruction conference in late November. Both leaders agreed to promote peace efforts, support Palestinian statehood, and enhance joint action to stabilize Africa. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati has met Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune in Algiers, delivering a letter from President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi conveying warm greetings and appreciation. Discussions highlighted the strong and historic Egypt-Algeria ties and mutual commitment to expanding cooperation, especially ahead of the 9th Joint Higher Committee session in Cairo this month. Abdelati praised Algeria's development progress and UN Security Council role, while both sides exchanged views on Gaza reconstruction efforts and the Libya peace process, reaffirming coordination for regional stability and Arab-African solidarity. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati has discussed bilateral ties and regional issues with his Algerian counterpart Ahmed Attaf in Algiers ahead of the tripartite mechanism meeting in Libya. Abdelati reaffirmed the deep-rooted relations between Egypt and Algeria, emphasizing preparation for the upcoming 9th Egyptian-Algerian Joint Committee in Cairo to boost economic and investment cooperation. He highlighted Egypt's readiness to support Algeria's development projects and discussed the Gaza ceasefire agreement, regional coordination on Libya's political path, and continued joint efforts to strengthen Arab and African cooperation for regional stability.
And then, of course, we have the host tonight, and I just want to thank you very much. There was a reason we chose Egypt, because you were very helpful and very, very helpful. Everybody wanted to have this, but we really thought it was appropriate, and you are a great leader. And he's a fantastic man and a fantastic general, by the way. But he's a great president, and I want to thank Egypt and all of your representatives for treating us all so well. Thank you very much.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that Hamas has no option but to surrender and comply fully with the ceasefire terms, including returning all Israeli bodies held in Gaza. He emphasized that Israel will persist in efforts to retrieve the remains of all Israelis killed during the conflict. Netanyahu reaffirmed that these operations are essential to national dignity and closure for bereaved families, asserting that Israel will not rest until every soldier and civilian is accounted for. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz has reiterated his country's unwavering commitment to retrieving all the bodies of those held in Gaza, pledging to continue operations until the mission is complete. Katz stressed that Israel's campaign will not end until Hamas is fully disarmed and its military capabilities neutralized. He highlighted that dismantling Hamas's arsenal is vital to ensuring long-term regional stability and preventing future threats against Israeli civilians, reaffirming the armed forces' resolve to complete their objectives. Egypt has dispatched its 66th aid convoy under the Zad al-Izza Provision of Honor from Egypt to Gaza initiative from Rafah to Gaza via Krim Abu Salim border crossing. The convoy transports over 250,000 food baskets, 1,000 tons of flour and 2,200 tons of medical and relief supplies, along with 1,200 tons of fuel to the Gaza Strip. This effort forms part of Egypt's ongoing humanitarian support to Gazans. Since its first launch on July the 27th, the Egyptian initiative has delivered thousands of tons of food, medicine, baby formula, and fuel. This comes as the Egyptian Red Crescent, serving as the national coordination mechanism for Gaza aid, remains stationed at the never-closed Egyptian side of the Rafah border crossing, managing logistics and mobilizing 35,000 volunteers to deliver over 500,000 tons of assistance. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres urged an immediate halt to violence in Sudan and warned the crisis is rapidly worsening, while also denouncing ongoing ceasefire violations in Gaza. Speaking in Doha on the sidelines of the Second World Summit for Social Development, Guterres called for an urgent cessation of hostilities in Sudan, expanded humanitarian access and protection of civilians amid escalating needs. He also cautioned that reported breaches of the Gaza ceasefire risk unraveling hard-won progress, urging all parties to adhere to the truce, facilitate aid, and support a sustainable political track.
To this nightmare of violence now. It's time for peace. Call for an end to the flow of weapons and fighters into Sudan.
The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees has reported that most residents of the Gaza Strip have been displaced by the ongoing war, with many returning families finding their homes reduced to rubble. UNRWA added that approximately 81% of buildings in Gaza have been either destroyed or severely damaged, leaving vast neighborhoods uninhabitable. It warned of a deepening humanitarian catastrophe as civilians struggle to access shelter, food, and essential services, underscoring the scale of devastation and the urgent need for reconstruction and international relief. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati has reaffirmed Egypt's firm support for Sudan's unity and stability, stressing joint regional and international efforts to achieve a nationwide ceasefire and ensure humanitarian access. This came during his call with his Saudi and Jordanian and Turkish counterparts to discuss developments in Gaza and Sudan. The Egyptian Foreign Minister also condemned recent violations in Al Fasher. On Gaza, he emphasized Egypt's ongoing efforts to uphold the Sharm el-Sheikh peace agreement and preparations for Cairo's upcoming International Reconstruction and Recovery Conference. Sudan's war has unleashed the world's largest displacement crisis, with more than 11.5 million uprooted as fighting intensifies and famine and cholera spread. Aid groups warn catastrophe will deepen without safe access and funding.
Sudan's war has triggered the world's largest displacement crisis and a rapidly worsening humanitarian emergency. The United Nations counts more than 11.5 million people forcibly displaced inside and outside the country, with over 4 million pushed across borders into Chad, South Sudan, Egypt, and other neighbors. Aid agencies warn that needs are outpacing resources as access is blocked, supplies are looted, and funding falls short. In Darfur and the Kordofan region, food security analysts report famine conditions in El Fasher and Kadugli after prolonged sieges and repeated attacks on civilians and infrastructure. Families are trapped with little food, clean water, or medical care. Relief officials say the situation is catastrophic and will persist without sustained access and protection for aid operations. Fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces has intensified around key urban centers following the fall of El Fasher. Eyewitnesses describe killings, sexual violence, and mass displacement. Analysts warn that the city's capture risks cementing an east-west split in the country and exposing civilians to further atrocities. The health picture is also deteriorating. A nationwide cholera outbreak is surging amid collapsed services with tens of thousands of suspected cases and many deaths. Doctors cite shortages of antibiotics, IV fluids, and fuel for hospital generators, while water systems remain damaged. Humanitarian organizations are calling for an immediate cessation of hostilities, guaranteed safe corridors, and scaled-up funding to prevent further starvation and disease. Without protection for civilians and unhindered access, Sudan's crisis will deepen and spill further across the region.
Sudan's Deputy Army Commander Yasser al-Ata vowed that the military will hold firm against the Rapid Support Forces, pledging to force their withdrawal from Kordofan, Darfur, and all Sudanese territories. In remarks to Joint Forces commanders, General Yasser al-Ata said that the Sudanese armed forces remain resolute against the RSF and will push the group out of Kordofan, Darfur, and any remaining areas under its control. He framed the campaign as a nationwide effort alongside allied formations, signaling continued operations and emphasizing the army's intent to restore state authority across the country. The United States is very much engaged in efforts to end Sudan's war, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said, citing a complex situation on the ground and no public details yet on a truce proposal. Briefing reporters, Leavitt said that Washington is actively pursuing a peaceful resolution to the conflict that has killed tens of thousands and displaced millions, while warning that recent spread of fighting raises the humanitarian stakes. She emphasized continued U.S. diplomacy with partners and support for relief access and civilian protection, but did not disclose terms of timelines for any ceasefire plan now under discussion.
The United States will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria and may take action to wipe out.
Britain has called an emergency UN Security Council session on Sudan, condemning violence in El Fasher after reports of 460 civilians killed in a single attack. The UK Middle East Minister Hamish Falconer urged an urgent council meeting to address Sudan's spiraling crisis, denouncing the El Fasher massacre and warning that over 30 million Sudanese now need aid. London says that it will press for civilian protection, humanitarian access, and renewed diplomacy to halt the fighting and stabilize the country. The United Arab Emirates has reaffirmed its full support for regional and international efforts to impose an immediate humanitarian truce and a comprehensive ceasefire in Sudan to end civilian suffering and ensure aid delivery. In a statement by the Foreign Ministry, the UAE strongly condemned grave human rights violations and attacks on civilians, describing them as blatant breaches of international law. It urged warring factions to uphold their responsibilities and safeguard civilians, stressing rejection of politicizing aid. Abu Dhabi hailed the recent Quad statement as a roadmap for peace and reiterated that dialogue, not warfare, is the only path to Sudan's unity and stability. The UN World Food Programme warns Sudan's El Fasher and Kajuli face famine amid critical food shortages, as the UN reports 40 killed in an attack on Al Ubayd and a fast deteriorating security situation in Kordofan. The WFP said that escalating shortages are pushing El Fasher and Kadugli towards famine, urging safe corridors and immediate access for aid. The UN reports at least 40 dead and multiple wounded in Al Ubayd and cautions that insecurity across Kordofan is worsening. The International Organization for Migration said that more than 36,000 people fled North Kordofan between October the 26th and the 31st, highlighting urgent needs for food, water, shelter, and medical care. For more analysis on the situation, we now move to Hani Saif in our newsroom. To you, Hani.
Thank you, Hala. We're joined from Cairo by Al-Ahram Managing Editor, Mr. Mohammed Izzuddin. Mr. Izzuddin, welcome to Q News. In what ways do Egypt's recent consultations with Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Turkey reinforce Cairo's role as a pivotal mediator in both Sudan and Gaza? And what tangible outcomes can be anticipated this month?
Hello, and thank you for having me on Q News. Of course, the talks here, they aim to bring together point of views and to agree to a specific framework, especially in Gaza and Sudan, after the operational escalations, and not, first of all, not following the point of the agreement and keeping their aggressions and violation of the ceasefire in Gaza, and then not also allowing the delivery of humanitarian aid or tents and blankets and everything, especially now with winter coming. And when it comes to Sudan, there are mass killings that are being carried out by the rapid support forces, and we need things to de-escalate and to allow the civilians to leave the war-torn areas where they are sieged, and then have a truce like what happened in the council a month ago. And so, yeah, Egypt's negotiations are happening daily and around the clock to get to know the latest updates and to coordinate with the international parties, whether it comes to the Gaza cause or the humanitarian crisis and the war in Sudan.
Mm-hmm. Well, London is urging an emergency UN Security Council meeting in Washington, insisting it remains deeply involved. Where does the genuine influence lie to secure nationwide ceasefire in Sudan? What would be a viable peace framework? What would it entail?
Of course, it is such a positive step from Britain, and unfortunately, the importance of the Sudan cause isn't on the top of the list now, even on the UN's list. And if it weren't for the genocide in Al-Fashir and the humanitarian violations by the RSF, the Sudan cause wouldn't have gone to the top of the list again, and we wouldn't have remembered what was going on. And so, yeah, we need a ceasefire and to allow the civilians, as I said, to leave and to have the RSF withdraw from Sudan and not use the civilians as leverage that prevents the delivery of humanitarian aid and hinders the progress of having the Sudanese army force the RSF to leave. And so, yeah, we need here a strong stance, and we need an agreement which will have all its points implemented and fulfilled. And we need to acknowledge that the civil war in Sudan between the Sudanese army and the factions there are some parties that think that we can that they are both equal, and yeah, on the political level they are, but when it comes to the military level, this is the Sudanese armies. And this needs to be clear for everyone who will be at the negotiation table in the upcoming phase. And so, yeah, Egypt, of course, wishes stability for Sudan, and they also wish to keep everything as it was, and to have peace return to our neighboring and beloved country, Sudan. And so, yeah, some things need to be made clear before starting negotiations and talking about details.
Yes, definitely. Well, accounts, as you mentioned, accounts emerging from Al-Fashir and Al-Ubaid and Kordofan obviously paint a very bleak picture. From your perspective, what immediate steps should Arab and African diplomacy take to stop the famine, the mass displacement from spiraling into broader regional turmoil?
First of all, the RSF need to withdraw from the land that they have occupied and not use the civilians as leverage or prevent safe leaving or humanitarian aid delivery. And so this needs to be forced upon them and to allow all parties to deliver humanitarian aid under international coordination. And so what's happening now is kind of unorganized and random, and it also and it also comes parallel to arms trafficking. And so here we have more than one problem. And so we need to end this war, deliver humanitarian aid, to stop using the civilians as human shields, and the Arab role needs to be they need to have a stronger stance and to have to coordinate with international organizations to deliver aid and to have a truce, even if for now.
Yes, well, one final question, sir. As Egypt prepares to host the Cairo conference on Gaza's reconstruction and recovery, what political assurances or linkages could also help ease tensions in Sudan, allowing Cairo's diplomatic track to integrate both crises rather than address them separately?
Of course, this is a good proposal, I think so, and we can call for it, but this may cause delaying the conference or the meeting. But if all the parties are on board and if we coordinate with the international organizations and the parties, so it will only be appropriate to get Sudan back on the list and to have negotiations about their peace, especially with the almost stability that we have in the Gaza Strip and not going back to full war. But in Sudan now, civilians are being attacked. We have genocide, and even from the RSF persons that don't have arms. And so we need some kind of a parallel meeting, or to have both combined into one meeting, even if it may postpone both causes. And we might also take advantage of having the international leaders to talk about a cause that is not talked about enough and is no less important than the Palestinian cause, which is the Sudanese cause.
Definitely. From Cairo, that was Mr. Mohammed Izzeddin, Al-Ahram Managing Editor. Mr. Izzeddin, thank you very much, sir, for joining us here on Q News. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we go back to the studio with Hela Al-Hamilawi. Hela.
Thank you so much, Hani, for the analysis. And now we delve into the latest developments on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin instructed top officials to draft proposals on potential nuclear weapons testing after U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans to resume the tests. Putin stressed that Russia has always complied with the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, but would respond if the U.S. or other powers conducted tests. Defense Minister Andrei Bolotov noted Russia's Arctic site at Novaya Zemlya could host tests on short notice. Russia has said that its troops were advancing north inside Pokrovsk, clearing Ukrainian forces in a bid to seize full control of the strategic logistics hub. Kiev has admitted its troops face mounting pressure, but insists that they are not surrounded, saying that reinforcements are being deployed. Moscow views Pokrovsk as a gateway to capturing the rest of eastern Donbas, roughly 10% of Ukrainian territory, and claimed its assault groups were destroying encircled Ukrainian units in multiple districts. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military reported intense fighting and the arrival of special forces, while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia had made no gains despite heavy attacks. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. But before we wrap it up, here is a quick recap of the top stories making headlines this hour. The Egyptian president receives his Kyrgyz counterpart in Cairo. Israeli Prime Minister declares that Hamas has no option but to surrender. Vladimir Putin instructs top officials to draft proposals on potential nuclear weapons testing. Well, that's all for tonight's bulletin. For more stories and live updates, you can follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to always stay informed. From all of us here, thank you so much for watching. A very good night.